Hello and welcome to session 4 of our child development unit. We are nearly there, I promise. Okay, not much longer. Okay, so in this session we are going to look at a range of theories of development, and we're going to look at the link between those theories of development and our current practice, so how they still influence us to this day. Okay. And then we're also going to think about why it's so important that we observe and assess children, okay, and how that could then go on and impact their area of development, okay? So when we talk about theories, what do we mean? So a theory is a set of ideas or a statement that predicts an outcome based on an observation and a study of behaviour. Okay, so I have a theory that all of you have probably switched off by now because I have been babbling far too much and I've probably bored you to death. So that's my theory, okay? But where did child development theories come from? So it was from people who realised that there was more to the world than what they were just being told. Basically, that a very long time ago, people believed that children should be seen and not heard, and children weren't allowed to express themselves and all things like that. So actually they challenged those ideas and they studied children's natural behaviour and the way they formed relationships with people and their behaviour and how they looked to others for that social interaction and how they began to learn from that. Okay, and they've drawn their own conclusions from their own evidence and study over time. Okay, so the reason all of those things are so important because they formed a basis for change. So they've improved on what we thought about children and how they learn and developed, and they set a precedent of how we work with children even today, and they still continue to go on and challenge and push us to be the best practitioners we can. Okay, so there are many different types of theorists, and if you are working at a level 3 as an early years educator or in the support teaching and learning program, so it doesn't matter which one of those you're doing, you are going to be doing and looking at different types of theories of development. Okay, so I will give you a basic overview of just a couple, but as you are working at that higher level, you will be asked to go ahead and independently research some of the other ones to help produce your work. Okay, so but like I said, we are going to look at a very basic overview of just a few. Okay, so one of the ones that I'm going to talk about is somebody called Skinner, and he studied how children learn and how their behaviour impacts the way they learn. Okay, so one of the things he did was experiment on rats initially. So he put very hungry rats into a box known as a Skinner box, and to start off with, the rats didn't do a lot, and then over time they realised that if they pushed a lever, then food was released to them. So over time they obviously kept doing this. They strengthened the neurological pathways in their own brain, and they realised that they would be rewarded with food when they behaved in this certain way. Okay, and that's something that we call operant conditioning. Okay, and that's still true to this day, and we still use that theory nowadays in our practice. So when we want children to behave in a certain way, we give them a reward for that. So it might be just something as simple as, wow, that's amazing, well done, here's a sticker. It could be some kind of behaviour reward system that you have in your nursery or your school. So thinking about like a traffic light system, so that children know if they behave in a certain way and they do what's expected of them, then they will be on the green traffic light and therefore they will be given a reward. And when they don't behave in that way, they move down the levels of the traffic lights. And obviously at some point there's a punishment. So that is something that Skinner devised a very long time ago. So he lived between 1904 and 1990, and he was one of the pioneering people that really looked at behaviour and why people might behave in a certain way, and he applied the work that he did with animals to humans in exactly the same. So we still use punishments and rewards as a way to get the behaviour that we want and we expect from children in our classrooms. So that still influences our practice today. Another theorist that looked at behaviour, and one that I will talk about as well, because these points actually cross over into a second unit as well. So if you are taking the early years educator pathway, then one of the units you can choose as your optional units is unit 21 around children's behaviour, supporting children's behaviour. And if you are taking the support teaching and learning framework, then behaviour is one of your, on supporting children's behaviour is one of your mandatory units, so the units that you have to do. So we're going to just cover behaviour a little bit more than the other ones, because like I said, it crosses over into other units. So another theorist that looked at behaviour was Albert Bandura, and he disagreed with Skinner that you basically train children to behave in a certain way, and he actually said that he believes that children learn through modelling of behaviour. And he pointed out that although the environment around them, so the nurture of what's going on around them, influences and shapes behaviour, actually the behaviour that a child is going through also influences the environment. So we know that ourselves when we have a certain group of children that might clash with each other, that actually the mood that child is in, or that group of children, actually impacts on everything else that's going on that day. Sometimes there are a group of children that sometimes you just need to kind of keep apart and distance and keep busy and things like that. So he suggested that children learn through modelling, and that those key adults in a child's life need to be good examples and showing the expectations. So again, even though we do draw on the work of Skinner in our practice, we also draw on what Bandura says as well. And this is why, as adults, we need to be positive role models all the time. We need to be making sure that we are constantly rewarding that good behaviour, that we're modelling it ourselves, that we're not going to be presenting bad language to them if that's what we expect them not to be doing themselves. So why should we be doing it? So we're modelling those expectations for them as well. Okay, so lastly, another theorist that we're going to look at just really quickly is somebody called Vygotsky. Okay, so he believes that the adults and those key relationships and that social interaction that children experience around them actually create a building block for them to learn and to scaffold their learning, to help support and strengthen and build on. So this is kind of what we're talking about with those neurological pathways, that you have to keep doing things over and over again, and that you have that chance, that social chance, to be able to practice those skills, and for somebody to be showing you and letting you experience what you're doing and modelling and helping, involving you and thinking for yourself and building on those skills and pushing you forward. So that's how he believed, and that was his social learning theory, that actually children learn from others around them. So what's being modelled to them, how they're being pushed and develop and grow, that they have those initial thoughts and feelings, and actually you give them the building blocks, the scaffold to be able to move forward with those other ideas, and to be able to give them the confidence to try out those things, and if they fail, that you're supporting their resilience to move forward. So again, that's a massive part of the work that we do in early years and school is that they have that person, those opportunities to learn from other people. So that group work, that social interaction with other children. So that still forms part and parcel of our practice today. Okay, so we've been talking about things over the last couple of sessions. Obviously, we've realised how important these different ideas of how children learn at development and those stages and those norms and the factors that are going to impact on a child's development. And actually, what do we need to do with all of that information in the first place? So why do we observe children and why do we make assessments on children? So we go through a process called assess, plan, do and review with children all the time, constantly, as part of our practice all the time. Okay, and because my drawing is in a little beautiful circle. Okay, so sorry that my writing is backwards. Okay, so constant circle, we are constantly going round this cycle. Okay, so we make an assessment of a child. So it might be when they very first start with you, you have a settling in session with parents, and mum tells you that little Billy really loves playing with the trains. That's his likes and his interests. And that she's noticed that at home he's interested. He doesn't really talk a lot, but he started to make some noises. Okay, so that's the assessment you've made of the child. Okay, you then do some planning. So we move around the circle, you do some planning. So you plan to carry out an activity with little Billy. So you're going to get the train track out for him because mum said he loves playing with the trains. And you are going to do a really simple activity where you're going to model some language to him, and you're going to do it more than once because we know that we need to secure these neurological pathways. You're going to do this activity a couple of times over the course of the time that he's in, maybe over a couple of weeks. So you plan to do this activity, that you're going to model these sounds, and then you do it. Okay, you then review how successful that was. Did it go as it was expected? Did little Billy make the noises that you were trying to encourage him to do? Was it a complete flop? Did actually they exceed your expectations and actually they started to come out with some of the words that you were saying, that you were modelling for them, that you were being Vygotsky, you were scaffolding that learning for them? And then we review it. What are you going to do with that information? Okay, so Billy Bob actually started to do some talking. That was a really good activity. We're going to assess him again. We're going to plan the next activity based on that information we already know. We're going to do that activity, and then we're going to review it again. Where are they sitting now? How's their development getting on? What can we do again? And it's a constant cycle that we go through with children and their learning and development. And that's really important that we're doing those. Because if you think back to our early intervention triangle, every child is working at that bottom universal level. Everybody has the assess, plan, do, review cycle going on with them. And actually, as we start to go through that cycle, we might think, wow, their rate of development is amazing. They're going quicker than I expect. I need to carry on and push them with these activities. Or it could be that they're working where they should be. Amazing, brilliant. We're going to carry on giving them those really good experiences. But actually there might be a problem. So therefore we need to start breaking our activities down a little bit more. That didn't quite go as I expected. I need to take it back a step, and we're going to start monitoring their development that way. So without that whole assess, plan, do, review cycle, we don't know if children are meeting those key milestones that we looked at in session 3. Are they working through those sequence of development to be able to get to that milestone in the first place? We don't know because we're not doing any work with them. Or we do know, and we're putting all this support in place for them. Amazing. Okay, so without all this work that practitioners are doing, whether that's at school, and that's exactly the same as at school, children and teachers go through that cycle. to be able to move them through the national curriculum. It might just be that it's on a big group scale as opposed to individually, like they are in the early years foundation stage or the EYFS. Okay, so how do we know if the activity that we're running is relevant and meets their needs if we're not constantly planning and assessing to be able to meet those needs? Okay, so that's why it's really important. And in the earliest foundation stage, it's actually a requirement, a statutory requirement, so a law, a legal obligation, that there are 2 main times that a formal assessment has to be done to summarise the stage of learning that children are at. So one of those times is between the age of 2 and 3, so typically 2.5 years old. So as a nursery, your key worker system, so whoever is responsible, the key adult for that child, will put a summary of where the child is sitting in those 3 prime areas that we talked about last time. So the personal, social and emotional, the communication and language, and the physical development. So where are they sitting in their development milestones in those 3 key areas? Okay, are there any concerns? Are they working behind in any of those levels? Because as we spoke about last time, if the children start having a delay in those 3 really important areas, which should be clearly established and children should be really secure in working towards by the time they're 3, then those other specific areas are going to start being impacted. So that's why we have a development check at that age to make sure that children are on track for their milestones and their development at that stage. And if they're not, we then start moving through that early intervention and looking at more support that needs to be put in place. So that check is also done alongside a health visitor who will also check their development from a health point of view. So is their weight as it should be? Is their height as it should be? They will invite parents and the child in to have a session to be able to look that, yep, we're definitely happy with their speech and language too, because it might be that because they go to nursery so much, you understand what the child is trying to babble and say to you, but actually as a stranger it makes no sense. So sometimes it's nice to have that fresh set of eyes for a parent as well. And the other stage that children are assessed in the earliest foundation stage is at the end of reception year. So as they finish the earliest foundation stage, they have something called an early years foundation stage profile check to make sure that they've met everything they should have done through those really important foundation years. Okay, so another time that they are assessed through the national curriculum is unfortunately SATs. So as they finish Key Stage 1 in Year 3, and when they finish Key Stage 2 in Year 6, when they finish Key Stage 3 in Year 9, there is also SATs, and then at the end of Key Stage 4 they sit their GCSEs. So again, that is an assessment of everything they've learned, is a way to check their learning and development. Are they on target with what they should be? And if not, obviously it's a really good opportunity to put support in place if it hasn't been put in place. Okay, so in this session we very briefly looked at a range of theories of development. Again, you will do some independent research on this one, and we've looked briefly at the links between those theories and our current practice. And we've also thought about why it's so important that we're constantly observing, planning and assessing for children. Okay, so thank you very much.